Happy day. See, look at that. I see that. It's fine. It's right there. So like I was saying, presentation goals. At the start of every presentation, especially like when I go to presentations, I kind of want to know like, hey, what am I going to learn? So during the time, kind of have that in the back of my head, like, oh, this is what's going on. By the end of this presentation, this is what I want to have. So again, like I said, out on your property, do I have a resource concern? Also going to be talking about options for remediating these resource concerns. So things like grass swales, shoreline restorations, rain gardens, and then we'll also talk about next steps. So we can talk to, which is pretty easy, you already know that, so check that off the list. Come talk to me, I can come out and do a site visit, we can talk ideas. Our district has cost share availability, where we can cost share up to 75% of what it would cost to install one of these practices to protect the lake. And then be motivated. So stormwater, one of the things, resource concern would be stormwater runoff. And so what that is basically when it rains or it storms, that water that doesn't get filtered into the ground and runs over the landscape and goes into a water body is looked at as your stormwater. And what we want to do is capture that stormwater before it goes into the lake, because it's carrying nutrients and it's carrying sediments that can negatively affect your water quality. Oh, I just said that. So some of the things that stormwater can do to negatively affect your water quality, algae blooms. So one of the nutrients that is found in that stormwater runoff is phosphorus. Phosphorus is like your limiting nutrient when it comes to algae blooms. So in order for to get algae blooms, you have to have, a bunch of different nutrients, and then that are kind of already in the lake in an abundance already. And the one thing that isn't in an abundance is your phosphorus. So once you add that phosphorus, then you kind of have all the elements to create those algae blooms. And 1 pound of phosphorus can potentially result in 500 pounds of wet algae. So the goal with a lot of our grants, our water quality grants, is focused on reducing that phosphorus loading. Property damage, so damage to your shoreline. You have, and we'll show examples of this, but like mowing to the edge of your shoreline, that turf grass has very little root structure. So those, it doesn't take much for wave action to eat away at your shoreline restoration. Those native plants and peat roots that give great soil structure that protect the shoreline. Fish habitat is another one. A lot of sediment in there can affect your fish habitat. It makes playing in the lake a bummer. So when you get those algae blooms, I think everybody can agree, like you'd much rather be swimming in a lake that was a little more clear than dark and murky with gross and algae all over the place. Okay, so this is where we'll talk about resource concerns. And again, just kind of keep in the back of your mind, what is your property like? So that after this, you kind of go out and reference what you learned today. So this house is definitely not in Isanti, but it's just a good example of impervious surfaces. So impervious surface basically structures or landscape that doesn't allow that water to infiltrate into the ground. So instead of going to the ground, it's being moved, on rooftops, driveways, sidewalks, into the lake, so it doesn't go into the ground. And really, in the past, 20, 25 years, I've seen a ton of this. It was like people coming in, like building new homes, coming in doing tear downs, building bigger homes, more roof, more driveway, more patios, has really contributed to that excess runoff. So yeah, driveways, roofs, patios, walkways. Water still looks kind of clear though. So slopes to the lake can also be kind of a resource concern depending on like what you do to like maintain. that landscape. So these pictures here, you can see, steep hillsides, have like low grass. So, with, see in that middle picture, the longer grass, so side by side, the landscape with the longer, more vegetated ground, it's gonna be better for like slowing down that runoff. You're gonna see more gully, more soil loss. You have like low grass, more maintained lawns, especially in that sandy county where it's like super sandy. You get that gullying effect, especially under trees where there's shade, hard to grow grass. That runoff can result in things like this, carrying sediment and phosphorus into your lake. So if you live on a property that is similar to this, and you have these issues, that recommend. Here's another example of impervious surfaces and so they're driveways. The two on the outside are accesses, so driveways. You see this once in a while around the lake where people have access directly into the lake, or maybe it's just to access their home. Again, another resource concern where that runoff really doesn't have a chance to like settle out. Just it's a path right to the lake, carrying again sediment and nutrients. The one in the middle there, that's on Spec Lake, and we actually did a project. With the vacancy with the far right and middle projects. We did projects, rain gardens. So in that middle one, we installed a rain garden to capture water before it got to that chute. Which must have been installed, many years ago, which probably made sense actually. Like there probably was some erosion issues. They're like, oh, let's put something there to reduce that erosion. What they weren't thinking is like capturing that runoff that was actually coming off the landscape, carrying those nutrients. The other picture with the house in it, we installed the rain garden at the end of that driveway. So when water came down, it was captured before it reached the lake. So the other resource concerns, so let's talk shoreline erosion. This is probably the biggest one, for people. And it can vary in different degrees. It can vary depending on the lake that you live on. So like the elevation of the lake, the fetch. So fetch is like how big your waves can get, depending on like the roundness or diameter of the lake. So, if you live on Green Lake on the south end and winds coming from the north, you're gonna get much bigger waves because it's going all the way across all the way across the lake, where something like the Long Lake where it's skinnier, you're not gonna get as much like momentum, I guess, right? Of that wave action. And that can cause some significant erosion at the shoreline. Having vegetation is super important. Like I was talking about before, the native deepwood plants help create structure and protect the shoreline. You can see in one of those pictures, there's undercutting, and that is pretty common with a lot of lakes around here, is that undercutting from wave action. The one picture on the top corner there could be like a combination of the wave action, but also runoff coming from farther up in the watershed or farther up in the landscape. As water comes down, gains momentum, more force to near the shoreline to kind of work away at the loose soil. That picture down in the middle, that's a Green Lake project or Green Lake site. We did a project there. That's just a result, I think, of both overland flow and some pretty significant wave action and whatever else Green Lake throws at their shoreline. Great example of those native plants and having a native plant buffer buffer. So you can see where the shoreline is gone. There was no structure, no native bioengineering plant, planting there. And you could see how it didn't hold. And that soil had no structure, had no protection. Shoreline where that fella is standing, you could see has, you know, those plants there that with the root structure that help protect the shoreline. So again, for everybody here and on Zoom, keep in mind, maybe this transfers, or you can relate to some of these pictures on your shoreline. Hopefully not too much though. So here is an example of rock. And I know rock can be beneficial in some cases to prevent like wave erosion and some of that stuff. In erosion, really just focus on erosion, has no filtering component. So like I said before, a lot of our grant funding is to focus on stopping that nutrient from reaching surface water, lake and streams. Rock does not provide that filter component. So when water comes from upland carrying sediment, nutrient, it hits those rocks, it just goes, right? The rock isn't stop, it might slow it down a little bit, but it's not stopping, letting things filter into the ground before it reaches the lake. Rock can also, you know, have a negative effect. And we were talking about this before the presentation started, but depending on how that rock is engineered or placed into the water, ice can kind of create a domino effect with the rock. So if you have rock in the water against your shoreline, and that rock is like sitting kind of like vertically, when ice comes in the springtime or deep freeze and ice is expanding, it hits those rocks and it's one rock, it's the other rock, it's the other rock, and it ends up actually pushing those rocks up into your shoreline. It's pretty significant ice damage, or they call it like ice jacking, or ice heaving down the shoreline. I saw a lot of this. We had a lot of calls about this year on Green Lake and Francis, and we're not sure why it was so bad this year. We're thinking potentially because the water levels were lower. But I mean, there's tons of variables that go into, you know, why that happens.
Can I ask a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
When you do a rock project like that, the DNR makes you put a blanket down.
Yeah.
Blanket prevents plants from growing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it make more sense not to put a blanket down and to let plants grow too, so you get the rocks and you get plants that would anchor things?
Sure. Totally. And I don't know if like it's required. Is it like for sure required? Like, I don't know.
Certainly
that.
used to be.
Okay.
It changed, but it certainly used to be, that you had to put a blanket down.
Because you're right. And I think Stern Soil and Water has just done just rock, or behind that rock, they do like a small like gravel and not that blanket. And so what that does, it kind of creates a media for plants to grow through that rock. So you kind of have that component of the root structure and the rock at the same time. But you're right, if there is blanket underneath there, the plants can't grow through it. I mean, over time, you're going to get weed growth because of just stuff like piling up on them, onto the rock and seed dropping, shallow roots, but it's not put down deep roots. Yeah, I don't know if it's a requirement or not.
There was a suggestion by the person who used to work with, to put rock in, put plants in between the rock.
Totally. Yeah.
So that the roots go down and anchor everything. So a blanket would stop that basically.
Right. And so I know like when you do shoreline planting and you incorporate like plant plugs. You guys know what plant plugs, and basically you get them from the nurseries. They're like a year growth of the plant. It's not a seed, so they're already kind of grown. You can, you know, cut holes into the bottom of it, which is awesome. But again, the negative part of that is with every shoreline plant, the goal is going to grow and increase, and in order to that, when the seed drops and, expands. So really all you're getting is just the plants that you put in there, not so much like the expansion of the seed ball and more dense buffered.
2 years ago, the DNR, my full PDF, that said you had to do a blanket.
Really?
I haven't checked it for the last 2 years. 2 years ago, that was a requirement that you put a blanket down.
Huh. Let's see here. Another example of a shoreline, maybe you have this, sand blankets, so, sand blankets are awesome for kids to play, adults to sit and play. But just keep in mind, like, if you want to do, if you want to bring in sand and create a beach, there are regulations through the DNR. One of them I know is like you can only do it one time. So like the sand that you bring in, you bring once, and if it gets washed out, like that's it, like it's gone.
You
So-
can't bring in more sand?
Yeah, that's really what the, oh man. Now I'm talking DNR regulation that I don't do, so I'm not sure, double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So it's just, when you're looking to do a project like that, just keep in mind, like, there might be a reason that there isn't a sand beach there. And it's because it doesn't support that kind of habitat. Keep in mind how close to the lake you want to go with that beach. I know, like, my parents have a lake in Wisconsin, and they wanted to do that. Yeah, which is great for the kids. So what I recommended was like, hey, make sure you just, like, almost like a sandbox kind of thing, like, install it, but keep like a couple feet away from that shoreline. So like when the waves do come, it's not hitting that beach. Granted, the beach isn't going right to the lake, but I mean, at least you have the sand near it, I guess. I don't know, just keep those things in mind. Here's an example of shoreline erosion. Let's see. It's hard for like people here to see me, but my right hand side, near the dock, it's eaten away more. It's because of that root structure of the plants. On the left side, this is Green Lake, so they see a ton of wave action. Without those trees there, I'm assuming there'd be a lot more erosion. Okay, so let's talk about addressing the issue. So now we kind of all have an idea of what a resource concern might look like on a lake, and there are other resource concerns, not just the ones that I showed you, but I just showed you the most common ones. But let's talk about how we address some of these resource concerns. So shoreline shoreline restorations. So solutions to the issue. So when you have erosion at the shoreline, we can restore the shoreline. So basically converting it back to what we might think it was like before development, right? And there's a lot of different ways to look at that. Shoreline restoration is different. Shoreline and what you do and how you remediate it's going to be different. On Spec Lake, than it was on Green Lake, than it's Long Lake, Skogan, Blue Lake. So just keep that in mind. And not only that, but like where you are, like, too, can be different on how you want to address it in terms of like complexity of how like we've done things to be to restore it and protect it. So shoreline restorations, here's an example of some native plantings. And we're using willow wattles or willow bundles, which are essentially like you get 10-foot sandbar willow stakes that are about an inch in diameter. You create kind of a log, or you bundle them all together, you rope them around, real dense, and then you can install them adjacent to the shoreline. It's a great bioengineering technique. The purpose of the willow is to protect what's going on behind and what we're installing behind those willow wattles. Willow are gonna deteriorate, they're gonna biodegrade over time. But what they're doing is they're protecting those plants that are installed behind the willow, give them time to grow, put down roots, put down more seed, put down more roots, so that when that willow does end up kind of going away, or, you know, biodegrading into the shoreline, a lot of times they degrade and the plants that were planted behind have kind of planted and rooted down into the willow too. But what it's done is it allows those plants to grow, protect the shoreline for long term. We also include a buffer. So a buffer strip, essentially taking, 10 to 15 feet from the surface water back and converting that to just native plants. A section of the property when water comes off the landscape. This is what we're talking about, like retention and filtering of runoff. The water is coming off the landscape, it hits that buffer, slows it down, and lets it filter into the ground rather than, washing directly into the lake. Erosion blanket, see that picture at the top, we incorporated a pollinator lawn mix, which is pretty cool. Because the landowner talked about wanting that area still to put chairs and sit down and hang out. So they didn't want tall native plants. They just wanted something that, had good wood structure, but shorter and would be able to mow. So we installed a pollinator lawn mix. The one on the bottom is essentially a buffer with that bioengineering, the little wattles along the shoreline. Systems from SWCD, love to come out, talk, brainstorm, whatever, hang out, after hours, have a drink. That's when the real good ideas start coming, so I'm down for whatever. So this was, the before and after, so this picture on the bottom there, that is this right here. So it's just showing like, what was the issue? We had shoreline erosion, we had rain, we had stormwater coming off the landscape, off the driveway, erosion of the hillside a little bit, and then, how we address those issues. We install shrubs, native plants, install a buffer, put in those willow, so kind of address all those concerns. We were able, before we do any project, we model the landscape to understand like how much nutrient is entering the lake based on the characteristics of that landscape. Computer modeling, people way smarter than me that put it together. I just input what I see on the landscape, then spits out the results. So based on kind of what we did here, we came up with a reduction of 1.5 pounds of phosphorus annually with a project like this, which is pretty good. Remember, 1 pound of phosphorus equates to potentially 500 pounds of wet algae. So
Here at this phosphorus council, because I know they've legislated out of fertilizer.
yeah,
So is phosphorus decaying vegetation as well, or what's its source? You're talking about running
Yeah,
off and washing it into the lake. Where's it coming from?
so it's like plant material.
Okay,
But you can also, so it can also bind, it's a nutrient. And you can get phosphorus from like decaying plants. There's a whole, and take me back to my science degree back a couple of years ago, but like the phosphorus cycle, there's different avenues which phosphorus can come from, but essentially it is a nutrient that's used by plants to grow. It can also, I'm sure, like in the nitrogen cycle, like it can be found in rain by, I don't know. It's a nutrient, comes from plants, decaying plants, fertilizers, it can attach to sediment. So I do know that, the ion plus negative, because the soil is negatively charged. Phosphorus has a positively charged something, and they connect to each other. Whereas something like nitrogen, it's negative and it leaches So when people talk about nitrogen as an issue, don't really have an issue of nitrogen in runoff as much because it goes the roots.
So they've outlawed it in fertilizers?
What's that?
They've outlawed it in fertilizers?
So,
I don't think so.
yes, so you're not supposed to. Sure. Pretty sure you're not allowed to fertilize with phosphorus if it doesn't need it. So like you could test your soil and it could say like, or test the soil, find out like, oh, it is depleted of phosphorus. So I think in that case, you're allowed to put down some of that nutrient to make up for what is not there. But so like True Green, True Green Lawn Company, they don't put down phosphorus. You can't buy like from like Menards or Fleet Farm. I don't think there's phosphorus in any of those fertilizers. You can go to the co-op and they can buy that. I don't know if I should tell them that. But right, in that case, it would be allowed. I don't think 100% sure about this, but if you could prove that it's needed, then you can do it, because what's happening if it doesn't, right? Let's say it's like, you have a glass of water, phosphorus, filled all the way to the top, you put more in there, what's happening is just, it's not being utilized. So that's why they say you can't do that. But, fantastic picture that everyone uses who does native plantings. It's just a great, example of the native plant root structure, how deep those roots can go. Opposed to, or in comparison to, oh, people see me, I'm looking at the screen far left, you can see the turf grass, it's pointed out in orange. That root structure is so small, it provides no protection, no structure. That's why when those waves come in, or that you get a big rainfall event, it doesn't take much to eat away at the soil.
Can you name some of those other plants?
I can. So we can start from the left. That is a lead plant. I think there's Indian grass. There is porcupine grass. Big blue stem, little blue stem. Prairie cord grass, which is a fantastic shoreline plant, grows super tall. But just keep in mind, if you're gonna plant that, they could grow up to like 6 to 8 feet tall. Let's see, side oats, switchgrass. What else is in there? June grass, purple prairie clover, and I'm just reading the names on the bottom, like just so everybody knows. Unless I wasn't gonna say anything, you guys thought I was super smart, but it's just like you can read about it here. And then also, I mean, keep in mind too, depends on where they're planted. How deep those roots are gonna go. This is just like an average on what you can expect, but I mean, it's just like anything, if you plant a plant in straight up sugar sand, opposed to planting the plant in, really organic soils, like obviously the one with organic soils is gonna like grow taller and deeper roots. So just keep that in mind, but either way, any of these plants for sure are gonna have deeper roots than your turf grass. So the willow bundles. Talked a little bit about that previously. They are bundles of, you can use basically like any sticks, right? 10-foot long wispy sticks, anything that's easy to manipulate, make into a log. You wrap a rope around it every 2 feet, and then place it against the shoreline. You stake it in, probably again every like 2 feet with, you get some 2x4s, cut them so they're, like a stake like point at the end. You can pound them in. I've seen people drill holes at the top so that you rope through the 2 holes, right? And then you pound them down, that rope that's going across secures them to where they're at. And there is no like true scientific engineering to making these things or installing them. So in your brain, you know how to like get these things to stay against your shoreline, like do it. You know, don't, it's not, it doesn't have to be
Can
exactly.
you,
what's-
can you buy these or do you make them yourself?
So I think prairie restoration, Minnesota prairie restorations, Minnesota native landscape. They will do these, they'll make them. I don't know if you can like just buy them from like a Menards or somewhere. I know a lot of county parks, when you talk to, your county parks director. A lot of the parks have tons of these sandbar willows, you know, growing everywhere, and they grow fast. So they're doing maintenance all the time of, you know, taking them down. Call your, county parks person and be like, hey, you know, I need 100, willow stakes. Is it cool if I go out and cut some? I'm sure they would be willing to take you out there and show you where to do it. Or just talk to me here in Isanti for sure. And we can get you in touch with who you need to, you can do it yourself. It's a cheap way to protect the shoreline. But again, if you're gonna do it, you know, talk to me, just to make sure that, you know, it's not a waste of time, you know, in terms of, you know, that's not a good way to do it based on where you live on the lake, or based on the lake you live on. So yeah, this was on, oh, this was on Green Lake. I don't think these are there anymore where we put them, but, this was a cool, we did where, is anybody here? Here? I don't know. This was like 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Shelley was there. Shelley put out, Shelley Larson. But yeah, this was at Dave Danzig's house in the garage. It was storming. So we did it in the garage. It was super fun. And I think tons of people are interested in showing how to do it. You know that, well, here we go. The purpose of these are kind of like a do it yourself kind of mentality, DIY thing to do, cheap way to do it. Here's a great example of the willow. So you can see the staking. So again, multiple ways to do it. Here, you have the willow, they just put stakes through the middle of it. I would recommend putting stakes on both sides and having a rope going through those stakes, or somehow, you know, connecting it to those stakes so that the rope pushes down on the willow. Because what you see with these is you get a real big, you know, multiple days of waves, you start moving, and then you just, like, once you have 1 or 2 go, then it's like really moving, and yeah, then before you know it, it's all gone. But I mean, this is a great example of a successful project. Willow Hell, awesome plant. Success behind it, Joe Pye weed, marsh milkweed, different types of grasses and sedges. So yeah, it does work. Here's another example of, might be a long lake. Looks like a long lake. It's a good project, just say it's a long lake. Shoreline buffer, protecting the shoreline from erosion, protecting and capturing runoff from the upland landscape. I don't, this is a terrible example. I'm joking, this is, Mark's project. So what Mark has going on here is a buffer, adjacent to the lake, and see behind that, there's a lot of roof, impervious surface. So any rainwater that's coming off that roof is being captured, by the buffer that's adjacent to the lake. The rock there helps with erosion, wave action. But yeah, it's just another great example of a shoreline buffer. Oh man, rain gardens. So we're done with shoreline erosion or shoreline restorations. Questions about that? Keep that back in mind for later. Let's talk about rain gardens. So rain gardens are we're still here. Awesome. Rain gardens. So rain gardens are bioretention basins. So the purpose of a rain garden is to capture runoff from the upland landscape and let it settle in that basin or rain garden and not allow it to go anywhere. So, I mean, they're fantastic projects. I think they're a little more effective than having a buffer along the shoreline, because with the buffer, there's water still moving and it can make it full eventually, depending on how the width of that buffer. With the rain gardens, it just sits in there. Unless you have like a 3-inch rain, then, you know, there's overflow and it does go, but these are fantastic projects for capturing stormwater, letting it filter. Great projects for, improving wildlife habitat. These projects can be, you know, very basic, they can be very complex. Right in the middle, obviously, examples on the right, Green Lake, Speck Lake, and then another project. Mark, right, Mark, is it your Bob? Is it yours?
Yeah.
That's yours, yeah.
Yeah.
So what goes into rain gardens, it's essentially a hole in the ground. Bring in some mulch, bring in some native plants. The one thing that or that you're gonna wanna do with any rain garden is just make sure that where you put it is appropriate. So yeah, here, so like where you put the rain garden, you want it in line with where that flow path is. So where that water is coming from at the end of that, or somewhere within that flow path is where you want the rain garden, right? You're not gonna put a rain garden, you know, way at the top of the hill where water's not going anywhere, because it's not capturing any water. So here's just a good example, and if it's not in the flow path, you direct that flow path, like this example. So this is on Speck Lake. We worked with the township at the beach area to install this 2-tiered rain garden. Fantastic, it's unreal, I have pictures. So Cobalt Circle is farther up in the landscape, ton of rain, ton of sediment, was coming down here before we put in the 2 rain gardens and the speed bump to redirect that runoff. It would just go directly into the lake. Here's a picture of it. So installed a bunch of the native plants, coneflower, black-eyed Susan, brown-eyed Susan, what's the right one? Yarrow is white, bone set. Yeah, I think yarrow is more, yarrow could be a message plant. What's that? Yeah. Where'd it go? So 2-tiered, Cobalt Circle, like this is in the, can't remember when this was, when they dug it out, but like, we have a pre-treatment chamber for this rain garden. We call it a rain guardian. Focus on water actually, like, I did it, it's pretty cool. But it's like a pre-treatment, so when the rain, when stormwater enters the pre-treatment, that's where all the sediment drops out, so that's the rain garden. But I mean, there was so much sediment coming off the street and adjacent landscape that it like overflowed our pre-treatment. And like, this is, it's a huge trailer. That's how much sediment they dug out of the rain garden. This isn't like from, you know, digging the hole for the rain garden. This was after the rain garden was done, all the sediment that it captured, which just like blew my mind. So I was like, how the heck is there even like a Speck Lake anymore? Like, how's Speck it? But it's awesome to see like, holy cow, this project is like even better than what we anticipated. Like, it's really doing work. And thanks to Wynett Township, you guys are on. Ken Murray, we through there. Speck Lake does the maintenance. So like,
So how deep or what's rain gardens or is that ending?
yeah, that's a great question. So typically they're a foot deep. So you don't want a big giant hole of where you're at. So typically they're a foot deep. What is going figure out this? So how you like size the rain garden, right? Since it's a foot deep, it's going to capture a certain amount of runoff depending on how the footprint of it, right? And so that footprint and size is determined based on, again, computer modeling on how much rain is coming from the upland landscape, the goals. Or you try to get certain, so like a 1 inch rain, you want that rain garden to be able to like capture a 1 inch rain. After the 1 inch rain, you know, either depending on the soil medium, so it's super sandy, a lot of times that goes real quick, so you can capture more than a 1 inch rain. The soil, in other counties, you know, clay soils, you know, doesn't filter as fast, so you kind of like stick around that 1 inch rain of capture. So then you get depth, 1 foot, you want to have that garden hold the water for no more than I think it's 48 hours. You know, so you want it to filter. You don't want to create. I mean, yeah, like a mosquito free. So that's all these rain gardens that we do are designed for that. So, and that's all going to be dependent on your soil type. It's not like you have sand, you really don't have to worry about it. It's fantastic. Your rain gardens are awesome because water just goes. In other areas where you have a more dense soil, so like clay soil or more loamy soil, they actually engineer it and they remediate the soil. So they'll dig it down 2 feet and then they'll bring in sand, you know, or a lot of times they install like under drains. So it just helps move that water quicker. Under drains, you're not getting as much of that capture filter component because it does have to move eventually, but it's still a good project. This is that project that I talked to you guys about 15 slides ago. This is on Blue Lake. Gary and Sue Smora, awesome people. So they have, this is like a small cabin next to their house. There's an access that you can see it comes off the road, goes directly into the lake. Don't know when that was put in, who knows, probably someone's lake access at one time or, you know, for ice fishing. Just cool. But what it was doing is just when it rained, it would carry all that sediment directly into the lake. So we saw the rain garden right at the end. Nothing big, pretty small. The drainage area wasn't too big, so we were allowed to design it to capture that 1 inch rainfall. Yeah, it turned out to be a fantastic project. The reduction is a half a pound of phosphorus a year, so it's for the cost of how much it costs to install a rain garden. What half a pound is awesome. Only issue I think was they had deer coming by and plugging out some of the plugs. You know, not much to do with that, shooting away, but the vegetation component with rain gardens is awesome, right? It utilizes that nutrient before it filters. Awesome pollinator habitat. My mom has one. There's the chrysalis, you know, monarch butterflies. We love that. It's so cool. It didn't say how many that just didn't know were around. Anyway, go on and 15 cocoons. Kids love it. But it's not like critical. So I've seen areas where a rain garden would be a fantastic project, but it's like under a ton of trees. You're just like, oh man, like probably not going to get a ton of vegetation to grow here. That's not a huge deal. You can still plant like, you know, ferns or, you know, like cocosas and cocosas grow anywhere. They're not native, but still the main point is to capture that water. So this is another picture. This is at Blue Lake. This is at their access. So we work with the township, Stanford Township. And above these gullies is where the parking lot is for the access. So we installed a rain garden like in between the hillside. So it's like right up in here by the signs and the utility pole there. In between that and the hillside. So what was happening is you get big rain, or create a flow path that went over the hillside down there, created a gully. There was also foot traffic component, so it was where people went to fish. So and they would go up and down this all the time. Kind of dual purpose here, other than capturing the runoff, awesome, reducing that flow path. Then also it's the far end of that picture, we installed stairs. So what we did was we redirected the people that were going there. So they weren't walking over the grass, you're using the stairs, which also help with establishing that vegetation. Hillside restorations. So where you would live on shoreline, a steep hillside to Stunt Green Lake. Sherry O'Donnell, she did a shoreline buffer too, but then she had a hillside that this is with many people, they're like, I don't want to mow anymore. Totally get it, like mowing that is super dangerous, number one, and it's also probably just who wants to mow the lawn on a hillside when it's 90 degrees in the middle of August. So converted it to native plants. Gosh, I wish this was a while ago, so I wish we could update this slide with before and after photos of that. But it turned out really good. It remediates any felony, provides awesome habitat, and just really good hillside structure. So again, hillside stabilization, basically, you're stabilizing that shore where there is not vegetation. There's different ways to doing that. These pictures show, we use core logs. You guys don't know core logs and soil wraps. And if you don't know what those are, core logs are just like like coconut fiber or something that could biodegrade. But you create these tiers along the flow path. Everybody know what flow path is, like where you see a stream going, creating that gully. You install these not parallel, but perpendicular to that flow path and create kind of a terrace. So you put like a couple of them, start way up top, it all depends on what's going on, but you know, put one up top, another one 5 foot down, another one 5 foot down. And when that water comes and stops at that first one, you know, kind of backs up, and you get more rain, and kind of goes over top, and then goes to the second one, the third one. The goal is just to like slow down that flow. What is this? Big Green Lake. This one's on. By the way, like all of these are like very much doable. Mark does all the time. I think you have a ton of shoreline restoration work, little waddles and whatever. Just thinking of how you want to do it. And I'm totally willing to come out and talk and brainstorm ideas. But these are pretty simple projects.
Especially back a couple of slides.
Yep.
I got a question. Oh, so that slide right there. So you've been to my property. I've got 2 shorelines. I don't use one of mine at all. And the one that I don't ever use is totally natural. It's trees and plants and whatnot. It's way steeper than that. My question is, I don't do anything with it. It's totally native or whatever. The only thing I do probably isn't good. I got lots of oak trees that come and drop all the leaves. So in the fall and the spring, there's nothing I can do with them except for rake it over my cliff. So I rake all these leaves over there in the spring and in the fall. Is that really bad? It doesn't get to the lake. I don't think.
Yeah.
But it prevents plants from growing. So like there used to be plants and I'm struggling to get through the 2 feet of leaves that I've put down. But I have no way of getting rid of these leaves. There's so many leaves.
Double-edged sword kind of thing, you know, like you're not breaking up.
And it's too much to mulch. I can't mulch too much to try to bag up or anything. It'd be hundreds of bags of leaves. So I rake them over my cliff, and it's all trees and stuff, and there's not a ton of erosion or anything. But they don't break down because there's so many leaves, so it's probably eventually breaking down, but there's always like a foot of solid leaves there.
Like you don't want to rake the grass or, you know, dead plants into the lake, right? That you're just.
Yeah, it's not getting to the lake because it's
I mean, the only thing I would
so
think
far
is,
away.
like, what's the runoff here? You know, are the leaves in a certain spot where you get a big rain and, you know, the leaves have biodegraded, you have all that nutrient there from, I mean, it's gonna be awesome nutrients. It's just like having what are those things called? Put all the fruit, old vegetables, what's it? Compost pile. Yes, so it's basically like a compost pile, so depending on where that's at, right, it's like in between the lake and where the water's going, then it might have, you know, some effect to the lake.
in the lake, I don't do anything on the lake, the other, that whole shoreline is like 400 feet of shoreline then. And it's all cattails and lily pads.
Yeah.
And if you actually went into the lake, it's all fucking disgusting. So it probably, so as the leaves are eroding to a compost pile, nutrients probably are getting to them, but it's not getting out to the, much of the water product, because the lily pads and the cattails are probably sucking at this.
Yeah, I mean,
It does, it goes from a steep cliff, and then there is a very level, I don't know, 4 to 6 foot path where the deer and stuff use.
yeah,
So it, I'm sure nutrients are getting into the
I
lake.
mean, I guess,
I don't know what else to do with these leaves.
I mean, yeah, right, so I wouldn't blame you for the muck and the bad water quality. I'm joking, but like, if you could get them away, best thing we do, like, if you could just move them, like, not in the path of where the water goes, or rainwater erosion, whatever. I mean, just think of, but if you can't, you can't. I mean, just do your best, right? And it's still, if you left them on on the hillside, it's still gonna be there. You're still gonna get runoff. It's still gonna go to the lake. But by breaking them, you're providing those plants to grow, so you're kind of checking that box, right? Just do your best. Not a-
I could probably burn the leaves possibly, like, and put them into one little area and burn them, but.
Yeah.
But, you know,
If you burn them, like, wherever that burn pile is, at the end, kind of like
shovel it up,
that, put it in bury it somewhere.
it'd be a massive pile of leaves to go.
Yeah.
A massive pile of leaves.
Drive them over to Mark's house.
Too much, it's literally too much to try to move them.
Yeah, it's like, you just do your best, I mean, on what you have going on. If no one is expecting you to like truck off, you know, 500 barrels of leaves. I mean, just, yeah, you do your best. Does that answer your question? Kind of, you're doing good.
Yeah, it helped make me feel a little bit better about myself, yes.
For sure. Here's another great example of the hillside erosion. Like I said, the biologs that are going adjacent or perpendicular with the hillside, creating that terracing, allowing water to slow down, reducing erosion. A lot of times, what we'll do is at the top of the hill, is plant a buffer, or I mean, just like the Blue Lake project, you know, putting like a longer basin for water to settle. So when the water does come over and reaches that hillside, instead of it going down, you know, it goes into that basin or it goes through a filter, a buffer, slows it down, also does settle. And just keep in mind too, this is all, like if you have a hillside, and just think how your land lays, right? So maybe you go up to the hillside, the upland landscape for some reason tilts backwards, right, before it gets to the crest of the hill. Like obviously, you know, that's not a concern, you know, because the water isn't getting to the hill and going down. So I mean, just keep that, I just kind of think about when water falls on the ground, there's a ton of rain, where is that rain going? You know, and that'll kind of give you an idea of like, you know, does something need to be done? Is something, or, you know, or are we good? I know a lot of some shores on the lake where people call the time, you know, and they're like, I gotta, whenever it rains, I have a giant pool in my yard. Like, how can you guys help me, you know, get that off the ground? I'm like, oh, like, no, because like really what you have is just like a natural rain garden. Like that is, it sucks for you because when it rains, you gotta put a water in your lawn. That's a bummer. But on our end, we're like, wow, natural rain garden. Good work, thank you. So just, yeah, kind of go out your landscape and visualize where does that water go? Where does that water go? Is it a concern? Is it not a concern? And then, oh, yeah. It's my cool slide. Same thing I just said. Look for erosion. Where the flow paths goes. You guys are out there. You guys live there. You know what happens. I always recommend, and this is crazy. Sometimes people don't know. Like when I'm out there, like, hey, when it rains 2 inches, I guess it makes sense. Like, where's your water? Where's that flow path? You go up. You're like, I don't go outside. It's raining like that. Like, yeah, it makes sense. So, like, we do have a big rain event, and it's 80 degrees outside. put on a rain jacket, go outside, see where, you know, your water's going.
How about rain barrels?
Yes, so rain barrels are, people don't know what rain barrels are, they're usually installed, on your downspouts. So
Mine are full, right?
are they? I mean,
I have 3 of them.
so, I mean, the nice thing about, awesome thing about not so great thing about rain barrels, right, is it doesn't take much for them to fill up,
Yeah, that's true.
right? But the good thing is, to like regulate that flow. That's like the full purpose, and you can kind of put that water where you can use it. So all rain barrels have a hose where it fills up and you can regulate. You put the water, right? Maybe you just put it on the ground, it's really slow filters into the ground. What you're doing is capturing that water during those rain events where without the rain barrel, it's just going down the downspout at a certain speed, velocity, whatever. And you're not controlling it, creates those erosion, creates those gullies, flow past. Rain barrels sit under your downspouts, flex it, allows you to kind of manipulate how you use it. You'll water their gardens. And it's not pumps on them, so. Did it that way. What's that?
You can put up.
Oh, yeah. For sure, yeah, like at the bottom, totally. Cheap for like $120, up on Amazon.
Yeah, Menards has.
Even rain barrel,
Yeah.
any type of rain barrel, any barrel to collect water will work, depending on, what do you want it to look like? I was just at a bit again where I was at, and the lady was like, oh, I don't know, husband's like, we have a rain barrel. And the wife's like, it's just a blue barrel, I'm not putting a blue barrel underneath my downspout, everybody will see it, well, it's a rain barrel, look after. She's like, so any barrel will work, but might want one that looks, I mean, they make them look cool, they make them look like barrels. Plant stuff on top of them, I just thought it was funny. Like, something my dad would do, that's fine, you just put a tub underneath there, put the water. I'm like, no way. Well, these are just example of designs. This is kind of when, let's say, you come and talk to me, and there is opportunity for funding and projects. We work together. You know, I can come up with designs. You know, what can we do to restore things? It's 75% cost share for projects, which is fantastic. We can hire contractors to come and do all the stuff. If we're with the landowners, if they want to do some of the work, there's just a bunch of different options. Have a talk to me and figure that out. This was that hillside erosion or stabilization picture that I showed you of cherries. So she did shrubs, plants, and as you can see, like anybody can do this. Like I did this, anybody can do this. Science, it's some ideas, plants. It's not rocket science. We're not building gas stations. We work together to create a plant list. So the plant list is kind of, we cost you for any native plants, depending on what the project is. I have recommendation on what plants to use. So like if it's shoreline restoration, you kind of want to go heavy on sedges, because sedges have those deep roots. Incorporate other flowers and forbs and stuff like that. It looks really nice, but heavy on the sedges. Rain gardens, like I said before, it's not like the super important component of a rain garden, but in that case, I mean, heck, we just do a bunch of flowers. We recommend ones that you get stuff blooming in May, all the way to stuff blooming in September, so you always have something that looks cool. And yeah, we just work together what colors you like. I had someone tell me the other day they didn't like yellow. I thought, man, that really kind of limits my flower. Yes, dude, not a yellow plant. But Minnesota Wildflowers website, awesome. Yeah, check that out. Filtered, like what you're looking for, like type of landscape, colors, whatever. Super easy to navigate. Check that out. Here, yes, this is me. So. Yeah, give me a call. Come into our office, he said down the road next to the bookstore in the co-op. Grab a coffee. Or just wait for a nice warm day and I'll come out sunny mornings, usually when I do my site visits. Not jumping anytime, but yeah,